Russia itself is saying that Europe is preparing for a bigger conflict with Russia. This came from Sergei Nareshkin, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Services in Russia, saying that Russophobia and militarization is all that the European Union have to offer. Now, Ukrainian intelligence is saying the opposite. They're saying that Russia is preparing for war with NATO by 2030, that this should essentially raise the red alert for Europe and to step up their support. Is this where the Ukraine conflict is naturally heading to, as the facts on the ground in the Ukraine conflict turn worse and worse for Ukraine and for all of its backers?
Yeah, absolutely. Europe is preparing for war with Russia, and certainly Russia is preparing for a war with Europe. The question is, which of those two sides is capable and willing to fight such a war? That's the big question. And I don't think there's any will on the European side to actually fight. Europe feels so less strongly about the cause, and NATO does, that they're not willing to sacrifice anybody, but they're more than happy to chuck the entirety of Ukraine into their meat grinder in order to sort of placate and satisfy and satiate their collective ego for NATO and for the European Union. Russia is preparing, but it's doing so because, unlike Europe, Russia is being encircled by NATO, and they're being provoked. NATO is basically overthrowing governments on their periphery, countries like Georgia, like Ukraine, like Moldova, that have been in the Russian sphere, economic and political sphere of influence and cooperation for many years. They're also doing the same thing with Azerbaijan, former Soviet a satellite state. For Russia, it is an existential issue. Everybody I've spoke to in the last 12 months believes the following: the Russian economy is on the verge of collapse. The Russian army is on the verge of collapse. That Russia is conscripting 60-year-old men, and Russia has lost 1 million+ men, and Ukraine hasn't lost that much. This is what's informing the military hierarchy, and then they're informing the political class, and then the political class is informing the mainstream media. These people are being incentivized to basically run with the lies, run with the propaganda, run with the disinformation, and that way everybody in the political world has got their ass covered. I think it's going to be a bad ending for NATO, for the West. They will double down on their reputations. They'll double down on their political legacies. They might very well tempt the possibility of a major conflagration with another great power, and it's always a risk. And in fact, Americans are wagering on the fact that Russia is constantly bluffing. That's all predicated on the same misinformation, bluffing, because Russia doesn't have any red lines. What they're telling you is they don't know what Russia's actual objectives are, politically and militarily. It's not like, you need a PhD in political science to work it out. You just have to listen and observe. When another great nuclear power is putting something down, you have to take it seriously and note it.